When they dragged Nyra Vale into the judgment circle, she still thought Lucian would stop them. That was the last foolish thing she ever allowed herself to believe about him. The entire Thornwood Pack had gathered in the winter courtyard beneath the alpha balcony. Torches hissed in iron brackets. Snow drifted through the cold blue dark. Warriors ringed the stone circle carved with old wolf law, and every noble house in the territory seemed to have found a place from which to watch her humiliation. Nyra's wrists were not chained. That would have implied dignity. Two guards held her by the arms as if she were already beneath the trouble of ceremony. Across the courtyard stood Lucian Thorne, the alpha heir she had loved in secret for almost 2 years. The man who had met her in the western pines, kissed her cold knuckles in the dark, and sworn, beside a small hearthstone her grandmother had planted under a rising moon, that he would choose her openly before the pack when the time came. The man who now wore formal black beside the high council dais as though he had never once touched her in the dark. Beside him stood Lady Selisse Varen, pureblood heiress, political bride. Beautiful in white furs and silver chains, with the kind of perfect posture women learn when they have never once been asked to survive without protection. Nyra looked at Lucian, willing him to meet her eyes. He did. That almost made it worse, because there was no love in his face, no defiance, only calculation and a cold fear of what choosing her might cost him. High Elder Marrow struck his staff once against the stone. "Nyra Vale," he announced, "you stand accused of improper bond entanglement, disobedience to alpha selection law, and secret conduct with an heir whose future mating has already been approved in council." A murmur rolled through the courtyard. Nyra's heart pounded so hard it made her ribs ache. Not because the accusations were false, because they were only half true. She had loved Lucian, yes. She had met him in secret, yes. But no one in that courtyard spoke the part that mattered most. He had pursued her first. He had promised her first. He had spoken the words under the moon beside her grandmother's stone. Now he stood in silence while the council buried the evidence of his cowardice inside her shame. "Speak," said Elder Marrow. "Do you deny the accusation?" Nyra tore her eyes from Lucian and lifted her chin. "I deny the lie inside it." Marrow's brows lowered. "Explain yourself carefully." "She did not force herself into an heir's bed," Nyra said, her voice carrying farther than she expected in the frozen air. "I did not trap, deceive, or manipulate anyone. Your future alpha came to me willingly." Repeatedly, the murmurs sharpened. Two noblewomen exchanged scandalized looks. One of the younger warriors stared openly at Lucian, as if only now realizing the accusation sounded less like seduction and more like cleanup. Nyra turned back toward him. "Tell them." Lucian's face did not move. "Tell them the truth," Nyra said again. Selisse's hand slid lightly onto Lucian's arm, possessive, elegant, calculated, and then Lucian spoke. "What truth?" he asked. The world narrowed, not because she did not understand what he was doing, because she did. He was not denying her. He was reducing everything they had been into something too vague to defend. Nyra laughed once, a broken sound sharp with disbelief. "You begged me not to speak like that to you in private. Now you need the whole courtyard to hear you pretend you were never brave enough to mean what you said?" A muscle jumped in Lucian's jaw. "Not honor, discomfort." High Elder Marrow struck the ground again. "This is not a lover's quarrel. This is about order." Nyra spun toward him. "No, this is about making sure I alone pay for a choice your heir was too weak to defend." That landed. Hard. The guards tightened their grip on her arms. Marrow's expression turned severe. "Thornwood cannot be led by a male ruled by private impulse. Lady Selisse Varen was selected by blood, alliance, and strategic necessity. Nyra looked from the elder to Selisse, then back to Lucian. You are going to let him hide behind that? Sellis's voice was cool and perfectly measured. I am going to let the pack survive. You should have remembered your place before you confused a weakness in him for a future. That stung less than Lucian's silence. Selisse at least had the courage to sound like the kind of woman she was. Nyra looked at Lucian one last time. Say it, say you choose her. He did not hesitate, not visibly, not enough to matter. I choose Lady Selisse, he said. The snow kept falling. That insulted her most. The world did not split. The torches did not die. The knight simply accepted that he had chosen the safer woman, the approved woman, the politically profitable woman, and was willing to let Nyra become the price. Then Elder Marrow pronounced sentence. For loving the wrong alpha, defying council arrangement, and threatening future succession stability, Nyra Vale is banished from Thornwood territory before moonrise. Her family claim to inner pack protection is void. Her name will carry no legal right within Thornwood until a council reversal is granted. Gasps rose from the lower servants' tier. Nyra's stomach dropped. They were not just casting her out. They were stripping her of the right even to be remembered as belonging. She should have begged. Instead, she smiled, the kind of smile a woman wears when grief has moved through her fast enough to leave only steel behind. Lucian flinched. Good, at least something in him still knew fear. She looked at him and said, You did not choose the better woman, Lucian. You chose the safer one. Then she looked at Selisse. And one day, when safety starts choking the life out of everything you sold me for, do not blame fate for the death of your courage. No one answered. The guards released her because there was nothing left to hold. Nyra stepped backward out of the judgment circle on her own legs, under her own power, while the entire pack watched. By moonrise, she had left Thornwood with one cloak, one knife, and no idea that exile was about to wake something older than every pack in the north. The winter forest beyond Thornwood's southern line did not care about heartbreak. It cared about blood temperature, footing, and whether a lone woman could outwalk wolves with less to lose than she did. Nyra kept moving because stopping meant feeling too much at once: the shame of the courtyard, the violence of Lucian's calm, the way Selisse had looked at her like a stain being professionally removed from silk. Hours passed in snow and darkness. Her boots were soaked by the time she reached the old hunter's ridge. The moon had risen hard and white over the pines. Her breath came in sharp clouds. Her fingers had gone half-numb under the cloak. That was when the pain began, not in her heart, in her shoulder. Nyra stumbled against a tree and sucked in a breath through clenched teeth. The left side of her upper back felt as though someone had laid iron under her skin and heated it from within. She reached back with trembling fingers. When she pulled her hand forward, her fingertips glowed faintly silver. For one stunned second, she thought she was dying. The next, she realized death would probably feel cleaner. The pain spread fast, tracing itself across her shoulder blade in burning lines, a crescent arc crossed by a single vertical stroke, like some ancient queen's seal waking in flesh. She dropped to one knee in the snow. Her vision blurred. The trees swayed. Somewhere in the distance, wolves howled. Then hoofbeats answered. Nyra's hand flew to the knife at her belt. 3 riders emerged between the black pines, cloaked in dark winter leather marked with a silver sigil she had never seen before, a crescent crown crossed by a blade. Not Thornwood, not Varen, not any pack crest she knew. The lead rider dismounted before the horse had fully stopped. He was enormous, less like a man taking up space than like a force deciding what space belonged to it. Black hair streaked with cold silver at the temples, a heavy dark cloak over war-scarred leather, eyes pale enough to look almost unnatural in moonlight. Every survival instinct Nyra owned screamed danger. Then the stranger looked at her shoulder and his face changed. Not to pity, to recognition. "Who touched you?" he asked. His voice was low, controlled, and more frightening for how calm it was. Nyra tightened her grip on the knife. "Stay back." The two riders behind him shifted, but the large man raised one hand and they froze. He crouched instead of advancing. Predators do not lower themselves unless they are either trying not to frighten you or know they already could. "Your shoulder," he said. "Show me." "I said stay back." He held her gaze a moment longer, then said something even stranger. "That mark only wakes on women whose moon promise was broken in public. The crescent is the oath, the stroke is the severance." Nyra went still. "What?" The pain flared again, and she gasped despite herself. The stranger moved before she could object, catching her as her knees gave way. His grip was steady, strong enough to crush her if he chose, careful because he was choosing not to. He pushed the torn edge of her cloak aside just enough to see the shoulder. A silver mark had burned through the fabric onto her skin, the crescent and line, the old queen's seal. The man's jaw hardened. One of the riders behind him swore quietly. "No," the stranger said to memory. "Thornwood banished a marked claimant into the winter." Nyra's voice came thinner than she wanted. "Who are you?" He looked back at her. "Cairn Valeblood. Lycan King of the North March." Her grip loosened on the knife. The name was old enough to sound like a story told to children, the sovereign above border alphas, the one Thornwood's council mentioned only carefully. "Why are you here?" "Because something ancient just woke in my territory," Cairn said, "and it was wearing your skin." She tried to pull away. He let her. Again, the choice mattered. "I'm not going anywhere with you," she said. Cairn's eyes flicked to the tree line where distant howls were getting closer. "Then you die here for a pack that already threw you away." No softness, no manipulation, just a fact. One of his riders dismounted and said, "Sire, we need to move." Cairn ignored him. He kept his gaze on Nyra like this, whatever it was still her decision. "What is this mark?" "The Moon Queen's witness seal," Cairn said. "A Moon-Hearth stone records promises spoken under its light in moon ink. When a sworn promise is publicly renounced to punish the one who believed it, the mark wakes on the betrayed. It does not think, it records." He nodded toward her shoulder. "If you did not swear beside a Moon-Hearth, it would not have burned." She thought of the small stone in the western pines, the one her grandmother had planted, the one beside which he had said the words. One of the riders behind him dismounted. "Sire." Cairn stood and offered Nyra his hand, not to pull her, just there, open. She looked at it, then at the tree line, then at the crescent burning through her cloak. There was no dignity in pretending frostbite would defend her pride. She took his hand. They reached Frostgrave before dawn, a fortress carved into black mountain stone. Towers rising straight from cliffside, narrow bridges crossing mist-filled cuts, blue-white ward fires burning over every gate. The second she passed beneath the outer arch, the mark on her shoulder burned hotter and the whole lower yard turned toward her, not for her beauty, not for her banishment, but because something in the keep had recognized her. Cairn led her to a circular silver-inlaid chamber where a silver-threaded woman named Malin, keeper of the North Archives, waited beside a sunken basin. Malin confirmed the mark, confirmed the bloodline, dormant witness succession, recognized through maternal descent, awakened by unlawful severance. 7 days before formal northern inquiry began. When Nyra asked what the inquiry meant, Cairn said only, It means Thornwood did not merely banish a woman. It cast out a claimant the old law recognizes, and I do not allow packs to break promise law on my border and pretend the pieces stay private. That was the first honest thing any man in power had said to her since the snow started falling. Nyra did not sleep her first night in Frostgrave. The mark throbbed in waves. Too much had happened too quickly. And sleeping under a Lycan King's roof after being publicly cast out felt exactly like the kind of story women died in when they mistook mystery for mercy. So she sat in a straight-backed chair by the narrow window of the guest chamber they gave her, watching snow coat the black battlements until just before dawn. Then there was a knock, actual knocking. She nearly laughed. "Come in," she said. Cairn entered carrying a shallow wooden tray with bread, a steaming iron cup, and a folded dark cloak lined in wolf fur. "Is this how kings threaten women in the north? With breakfast, if I were threatening you, there would be less bread." That was almost funny. Almost. He set the tray on the table. He looked at the untouched bed, then at the chair by the window. "You did not sleep. You noticed too much. I survive because of it." She rose slowly. The room was simple, black stone, wool blankets, iron lamps, nothing gilded. Everything in Frostgrave seemed designed by people who cared whether objects earned their space. "Why am I here?" she asked. "Because your mark woke on northern law. I will not let Thornwood call that a private pack matter. No, I mean really here, in your chamber wing, under your protection." Something unreadable passed through his face. "Because once the mark is visible, you become a bargaining object. Under ordinary circumstances, they would try to marry you, hide you, claim you, or kill you depending on which option cost them least." Nyra held his gaze. "And you, I protect what crosses into my territory under witness law." It was an answer. It was not the full one. But unlike Lucian, he did not dress partial truth as devotion. He presented it like a boundary. Oddly, that made it easier to trust. She looked down at the tray. "If I had crossed your border without the mark, would you still have helped me?" Cairn was silent for 2 heartbeats. Then, "Yes." She looked up sharply. He did not flinch. "You don't even know me." "I know what a banishment wound looks like," he said. "And I know what kind of man makes one." That landed deeper than it should have, because it came without any attempt to make himself look good for saying it. By midday, Malin completed the basin reading. Bloodline verified, dormant witness succession recognized, mark awakened by unlawful public severance. 2 archivists recorded every word. When the reading ended, one archivist bent to one knee, then another, neither dramatic. Just immediate. Nyra looked at Cairn. He was watching her with that same steady weight, not kneeling, weighing something larger. Good. She had no use for men performing ritual before they understood consequence. Malin closed the ledger. "Thornwood has 7 days before formal inquiry." Cairn looked at Nyra. "When they answer, you will not stand in the room alone, but you will choose what is asked." That sentence reached places her anger had been guarding for months. Too dangerous, too clean. So she did what smart women do when safety starts to look like shelter. She kept her distance, and she watched him for the shape of what he was not reaching for. Lucian arrived on the 5th day, not alone. 3 riders and 2 council envoys with him. Nyra was in the lower archive with Malin when the guard announced him. Every instinct said turn him away. But mercy was not what he deserved, audience was. "Bring him to the East Witness Hall," she said. He had removed the formal cloak. He looked too much like memory, dark hair, hard mouth, shoulders she used to imagine leaning against when winter seemed unbearable. Then she remembered the choosing ceremony and the beauty shrank. "I came as soon as I understood where you had gone," he said. "No," she said. You came as soon as you understood what I was attached to. He flinched. I did not know about the Moon-Hearth oath recording, he started. That sentence is beginning to bore me. His jaw hardened. I made the choice I thought would stabilize Thornwood. There it is, she laughed quietly. The same lie in a slightly sadder voice. His eyes flashed. You think this is easy for me? No, she said softly. I think it is easier for you than courage was. For a second, she saw the man she once loved beneath the air training and political fear. A man who maybe did feel something real, too late. Come back with me, he said. We can fix this before the Northern Court makes war of it. Fix this as if I were a ledger error. Nyra, no, her voice cut through the hall like winter iron. Do not say my name like this room exists to help you grieve what you did to me. He swallowed. What do you want from me? Nothing. That destroyed him more thoroughly than outrage would have. Regret can survive hope. Nothing kills hope like irrelevance. At the doorway, a movement pulled their attention. Cairn stood there, not interrupting, not rescuing, simply present. Lucian's whole body tightened. I am here as Thornwood heir. Cairn did not look at him. I did not ask you. Nyra should not have enjoyed that as much as she did. She looked at Lucian one final time. Let him leave on his own feet. That was the first moment Lucian truly understood he had already lost her, not politically, not strategically, but personally. Because she was granting the shape of his exit, not asking to be chosen. 3 days later, Selisse arrived. She had traded white furs for dark blue travel velvet, pearl pins still in place, pride sharpened by sleeplessness. Nyra received her alone in the same hall, a brazier between them. This place suits you more than Thornwood ever did, Selisse said. An unusual opening from the woman who wore my humiliation like jewelry. Yes, I deserved that. She sat without waiting to be invited. I did not come to apologize for being chosen. That would insult both of us. Then why? Because Lucian ruined both of us, differently. She leaned forward. I thought he chose me for power. I was wrong. He chose me because I was easier to explain. Nyra sat back. It was uncomfortably fair. He loved you, Selisse said bluntly. I saw it the night of the choosing. He looked at me like a decision. He looked at you like a wound he was trying to amputate before anyone saw how deep it had gone. Are you helping me? No, I am clarifying the battlefield. She named her father's plan, a rushed mating before the inquiry could conclude, to legitimize the Varen alliance in haste before Ashmere's bloodline could be formally recognized. If they marry fast, your claim becomes embarrassing rather than legal. What do you want? Out. The word was almost naked. I will not be paraded into a rushed mating to save Lucian from the consequences of his own cowardice. If his council wants a pureblood bride so badly, they can marry each other. Nyra looked at her for a long time. Selisse was not a friend. She would never be a friend. She was a woman who had helped humiliate her and who now saw her own cage clearly. That made her useful. It did not make her good. I will not stand in your way out, Nyra said. Do not mistake that for trust. Selisse's mouth tightened in something that almost resembled respect. I would not trust me either. Then she rose and left Frostgrave. When Nyra told Cairn, he did not celebrate the intelligence. He only said, useful, not safe. Plan accordingly. That kind of steady was becoming the most dangerous thing in the Citadel. Cairn did not press. That was the problem. He trained with his guard at dawn, reviewed petitions before noon, rode the northern ridges in snow and sleet like the mountain had grown him for weather instead of warmth. He answered questions directly, disagreed without treating disagreement as challenge, offered protection without calling it ownership. And worst of all, He seemed to understand exactly how starved she was for that, and still refused to use it against her. The first time he truly unsettled her was in the war maps room. Nyra had spent half the night reviewing Western levy lines, ink on her fingers, trying to determine how far Thornwood's council would push the rushed mating. She had a headache behind both eyes when Cairn entered carrying 2 cups of bitter northern tea. "You missed supper," he said. "That sounds like spying. It sounds like pattern recognition." He set 1 cup near her hand and moved to the opposite side of the map table. Not beside her, not close enough to crowd, always distance enough to remind her he could choose restraint whenever he wanted. "What would you do," she asked, "if a woman arrived in your hall carrying leverage strong enough to destabilize half the border?" He looked down at the map, then back at her. "What would I want to do, or what would the law allow me to do? That is annoyingly careful. It is also the difference between rule and appetite." There it was. The line that separated him from every man who had reached for her first and asked later. "What would you want to do?" Something shifted in his face. "Protect the leverage until the woman carrying it decided what to make of it." The room went very still. Nyra looked away first, and if she decided badly, I would tell her. That nearly undid her, not because it was romantic, but because it was decent. Decency from powerful men she was discovering could feel more intimate than vows. 3 nights after the map room, the formal recognition hearing gathered in Frostgrave's Sovereign Hall. Northern witnesses stood along the long table. Thornwood's reviewed ledgers were sealed at its center. The old silver basin burned in the middle. The hearing had reached its final question. If Ashmere bloodline was restored under Northern sovereign law, who stood as its witness protector until full territorial authority was settled? Most expected Cairn to name a warden. Instead, the basin flared white-blue. The crescent on Nyra's shoulder burned, and a voice older than the hall rose out of the stone. Sovereign witness recognized. Kneel. The command was not for Nyra, it was for Cairn. He did not move at once. He was weighing the old law, the room, the witnesses. Then he stepped down from the dais, crossed the floor, and went to one knee before her, not as lover, not as theater, as a king obeying a law older than his crown. Cairn lifted his gaze to hers, calm, steady, entirely unashamed. "I stand witness," he said. "Until her authority is settled by law, her person is under my protection, her word is under my seal, and any strike against her becomes a strike against the Northern crown." That was not romance. It was power taking her side publicly, openly, without forcing her to earn it through humiliation first. When the hall adjourned and they were alone in the upper corridor, Nyra asked the question she had been holding since he rose from his knee. "Did you know that would happen? Not for certain. Would you have done it even without the basin?" He looked at her then, really looked. "Yes." The answer hit deeper than it should have. He did not dress it up. "No, because you deserve it. No, because fate requires it. Just yes." "Why?" "Because I watched what public cruelty did to you," he said, "and I decided no one would use rank to make you stand alone again if I had the power to stop it." That sentence reached places her anger had been guarding for months. Too dangerous, too clean, so she bought herself time with sharpness. That sounded alarmingly close to care. His mouth moved faintly. "You are observant." They did not touch that night. But he had knelt without being asked, without making the moment a claim. And for the first time since the snow started falling, Nyra did not feel she was the only one holding her own weight in the room. Lucian made the worst mistake a panicked ruler could make. He tried to get ahead of the scandal with ceremony. The Winter Crown Assembly at Wormglass Hall was supposed to stabilize his image, Stand beside Selisse, let the council speak of necessity and continuity, drown Frostgrave's unease under banners and ritual. Nyra almost thanked him for the invitation. Nothing destroys a fragile lie faster than forcing it to perform in public. She went as Lady Nyra Ashmere under Northern witness protection. Cairn went too, not behind her, not ahead of her, beside. Every step of the way that mattered. When she entered, the whole room watching, Lucian went still. Good. The officiant began his recitation. Nyra let him get almost to the end, then she rose. As recognized Ashmere claimant under Northern witness protection, she said, her voice carrying across polished stone, I contest the standing of this union and the political validity of any claim that Thornwood has secured lawful winter stability through it. A visible ripple moved across the noble tiers. I submit 3 lines of contest, she continued. First, unresolved wartime transfers involving Ashmere Western protections. Second, documented instability in House Varen holdings being falsely presented as strategic strength. Third, Thornwood's attempt to remove a legally relevant claimant through public severance rather than transparent review. Councillor Verk half rose as if outrage might stop paperwork. Nyra did not pause. At her nod, Malin came forward carrying a veil vellum, thin, silver-edged, preserved in the Frostgrave archive for 200 winters. She laid it on the table before the officiant. This vellum hung above the small Moon-Hearth in the western pines, Malin said, planted by Lycan Ashmere, grandmother of the claimant. Moon-Hearth's record promises spoken within their circle in Moon Ink. This is what they recorded on the night of the 10th of March, 2 winters past. The vellum, warmed by her hand, showed a single line of silver script in a man's hand, thumbprint beside it. I choose you, Nyra Vale, under the moon, openly. Lucian Thorne, silence. Not silence of surprise, silence of proof. The mark on Nyra's shoulder, the record in the archive, the thumbprint, 3 pieces of the same truth. No, he said, she said, left. Lucian looked carved from sleeplessness and pride forced to stand upright. Beside him, Selisse closed her eyes once, then opened them and looked directly at her father's envoy, not at Lucian. She removed the silver betrothal clasp from her shoulder, laid it on the table, and said, House Varen withdraws. I will not be used to dress panic as strategy. The bride gone. The vow veil entered as evidence. The king beside her silent and steady. The officiant asked the question that mattered. Did you knowingly reject a politically relevant claimant bound to you by witnessed moon promise while entering a union now proven materially unstable? The room went dead silent. Lucian looked at Nyra, no secrets left in his face. Only regret, genuine regret, the kind that arrives too late to rescue anything. Yes, he said. That single word fractured the room. Nyra stepped forward. You knew, you just hoped I would be left too weak to make your choice expensive. He said her name. No, do not say my name like this room exists to help you grieve what you did to me. Lucian swallowed. What do you want from me? Nothing. That answer destroyed him. She saw it land. Because regret can still feed on hope, irrelevance starves it. Elder Marrow attempted to speak and was cut short by Cairn's look alone. The Right Keeper Vessa, brought from Frostgrave to witness, stamped the ruling before Marrow could reassert his stripped authority. Thornwood succession suspended for 1 year's review. Lucian Thorne removed from all treaty and mate selection authority. Lord Alaric Thorne formally censured for failure of oversight. Elder Marrow removed from judicial function. Councillor Verk stripped of vote for 1 winter. Varen fined the bride price and stripped of Western route privilege. The Varen alliance dissolved. Selisse Varen returned to her father's hold. Nyra Vale Ashmere restored in bloodline, under northern protection until full settlement. When the formal suspension was declared, Lucian did not chase her. He stood in the center of Wormglass and learned the difference between choosing safety and actually being left with anything worth keeping. Sometimes the safe choice still ruins you. It just ruins you slower. Lucian wrote twice after the assembly. Nyra burned the first letter unread. The second she opened because Malin said, dryly, that sometimes reading a man's last excuse makes it easier to stop imagining he still has a better one waiting. He did not. The letter was a plea dressed as dignity. He admitted he had loved her, admitted he had panicked, admitted he thought he could survive losing her privately if it preserved the pack publicly. He asked her to write back once to tell him there was a path. Nyra read it once, folded it, and set it in the brazier without ceremony. A man's regret was not a prize, especially when it arrived after he had already taught the whole world how cheaply he valued her pain. By spring, the western settlements had begun restoration under Ashmere witness law. Grayfin's root agreements expanded. Thornwood's old council fractured and reformed under the inquiry's rulings. Varen paid its fine in full. Selisse was betrothed before summer to a miner holed 2 weeks east of her father's lands. No one in the north told Nyra she should be sorry for her. Women who call you a stain in front of a court do not become friends because their cage later claps shut. Nyra stopped thinking about Lucian every morning, then every other morning, then once a week. Then only when legal updates forced his name into the room. That, more than any humiliation she could have orchestrated, was the real victory. The day she realized she no longer needed him to regret choosing wrong was the day she finally became free of him. That same day ended with Cairn beside her on the high eastern terrace, while thawing wind moved through the black pines below. No council, no witnesses, no courts, just mountains and the clean, dangerous quiet that always existed around him. "You have been smiling more," he said. "That sounds like an accusation." "It is a report." She leaned against the stone parapet. "Maybe I have fewer people in my life to disappoint me." Cairn turned toward her. "Maybe you have started choosing different men." That line settled warm and frighteningly deep. Nyra looked down into the valley for a long moment before asking the question she had been avoiding. What happens when a woman survives the worst version of love she thought she wanted? Cairn answered without delay. She stops mistaking pain for proof. The mountain wind moved through her hair. And what if she no longer trusts herself to know the difference? His expression softened by only a fraction, which was somehow enough. Then the right man waits long enough that she never has to guess. No claim, no grand speech, no demand hidden inside tenderness. Only patience, the one thing Lucian never possessed when it mattered. Nyra stepped closer, not all the way. Just enough, and how long would that man wait? As long as it takes for your choice to feel like freedom instead of recovery. That broke something open inside her, not painfully, finally the opposite. Because no one had ever loved her in a way that left her more room instead of less. She reached for his hand first, every part of that mattered. Cairn looked down at their joined hands, then back at her face, giving her one last chance to change her mind. Good, let every step of this be deliberate. Nyra smiled, not the cold smile of the judgment circle, not the hard one she wore while dismantling enemies. A real one, rare enough to feel almost sacred. "I think I am done making my future answer for a man who already failed his turn." Cairn's thumb brushed once over her knuckles. Nothing more, nothing taken. "Good," he said. That single word contained more tenderness than all the vows Lucian had ever whispered in the dark. The formal sealing of Ashmere restoration took place under open sky at midsummer. Witness houses gathered from across the passes. Frostgrave's bells rang. When the rite required the sovereign guardian to kneel once more before the claimant to mark protection's passage from custody into free alliance, Cairn knelt before her in full daylight, not because she needed to be saved, not to dazzle a court, but because the law required it, and he did not treat law as something men of power stood above. When he rose, the officiant asked the final question. Lady Nyra Ashmere, with line restored and protection transferred from necessity into free alliance, do you choose your future under your own name and will? She looked at Cairn, then at the gathered witnesses, then at the mountains that had watched her arrive banished and rise unowned. Yes, she said. That afternoon, a rider arrived from Thornwood bearing Lucian's last letter, not a plea this time, but one line of acknowledgement. You were the right choice. I was simply not a worthy man. Nyra read it once, then handed it to the brazier without answer. Cairn watched the paper burn without asking what it said. Trust meant not every silence had to be broken open for proof. When the court dispersed and the witnesses had gone, she stood with him among the summer roses climbing the black stone of the upper garden. He had knelt twice, once because the law commanded it, once because alliance required it. He had never knelt to win her. She touched his face first. Then, after he had asked with his eyes and she had answered with a small nod, she kissed him, slowly, deliberately, like a choice she wanted the world to witness only because the world no longer frightened her. Below them, Frostgrave carried on with bells and summer preparations. Beyond the mountains, Thornwood would continue learning how expensive cowardice became when the woman it discarded learned to live beyond the need for its approval. That was enough, better than enough. Lucian's regret was real, permanently, publicly, bitterly. But the sweetest part of Nyra's story was not his regret. It was that his regret stopped mattering long before her happiness began. He had banished her for loving the wrong alpha. What none of them understood was simple. The wrong alpha was never the one she lost. It was the one she survived. And when the Lycan King finally knelt before her in daylight, it was not to rescue a broken woman. It was to honor the queen-shaped power in the one no cruel man had been strong enough to keep. He knelt to law before he knelt to her. He knocked before he entered. He brought bread instead of demands. He answered, "Would you have helped me without the mark?" with a plain yes, and he waited every step of the way for her choice to feel like freedom instead of recovery. But let's be honest, down in the comments. If you had been Nyra standing on that terrace after reading Lucian's last letter, would you have believed the Lycan Kings as long as it takes and said yes to the alliance? Or would you have walked to Ashmere alone and ruled your restored line without any man kneeling at all? Drop your answer, and if you're the kind of reader who would have ruled alone, stay close.